Hello and good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are. I'm very happy to welcome you to a new online event, the second one of this week, which will talk all about the digital single market and much more. I have three distinguished speakers to accompany me in this voyage. This will last an hour and we will take questions from the audience, so please feel free to leave your questions and comments in the Facebook section of comments of this event. And I will be sure to take them at least a half hour after we start our discussion here. But first, let me introduce our three speakers. I have on the one hand, Mr. Karim Lezina, who is live from the United States at this moment. He is the head of the regulatory and international and external affairs at AT&T. And I'm also very happy to welcome two members of the European People's Party group, who both of them are members of the IMCO committee, which stands for Internal Market and Consumer Protection, which of course is at the heart of our discussion today. But I'd like to dive in immediately because time is of the essence at this moment. I want to ask you, Mr. Lezina, when you, you're in the US at this moment, we're here on the other side of the Atlantic. What would you say are the key actions that the EU should undertake to facilitate digital investment in Europe when you compare it, for instance, to the United States where you are presently? Do you see any big issues that definitely need to be addressed by policymakers? And from a business perspective, what would those be? Thank you.
Okay, so I have the next 6 hours to discuss that, right? I'm joking, and please call me Karim because Mr. Lezina get me even older than what I look. So first of all, I want to say hi to Andreas and Pablo because it's fantastic to see them, even if we are over, there is a little ocean between us but just as an FYI for all the participants, these two guys are probably the lead of any policy that you can imagine. So they're going to be much more interesting than me because really they are the ones that are going to write that piece of legislation that we are discussing. Look, your question is very important, and let me give like a 3 minutes answer so we have more time. But I think what we can learn from this crisis, and as you can see, I'm not exactly in my office. I'm working from home because we are still on a kind of strange situation with COVID. But I think what COVID teaches us is that digital services are a key driver of our economic growth, and that economic growth is essential for the future of our economy. We don't know how many months we are going to stay in these strange situations, but we know that after, when this pandemic will finish, one thing will be clear, is that digital will be even more important than it has been before, because we are getting used to it. We're getting used to do these video calls, we're getting used to use technology in our daily life. And from homeschooling to home office, I think a lot will change. To be honest, I am just waiting the possibility to take a plane and come back to Madrid or to Berlin or to Brussels and have a good cornet de frites that I don't find here, unfortunately. Bad for my cholesterol, but very good for my mind. But what we need to look at is what can we do in order to support the growth of digital in the next years. And this is something Pablo and Andreas have been working so much in the past. And if we look at what I was trying to look at the State of the Union speech of President von der Leyen, and she said these words in last week that are very clear, where she said that broadband connection are now the prerequisite for home working, home learning, online shopping, and increasingly by the day for new important services. Without broadband connection, it is now barely possible to build or run a business effectively. Okay? So I think this is a great plan. Obviously, what we need to do now is to implement that plan with a regulatory framework that are supporting those investments, that are giving the incentive to the operators, to the telcos operators, but also in general to the internet ecosystem to invest more and to thrive. So we need regulatory, certainty in a certain sense, but we also need a very strong competitive framework. And competitive framework that look at the internet ecosystem as an ecosystem and doesn't look like only the small telecom part, the other part, and the other part. And I think this is the objective of the DSM, but also the DSA, and of the work that the European Commission is doing with this new competition tool to be sure that there are no real digital gatekeepers that are there on the market. So for me, this is the most important thing. And looking at the US, where I am, is the proof that if you are doing an investment framework or a policy framework that support investments, those investments follow. And it's not a surprise when you look that in the last years, the biggest investors in the US have been Verizon and AT&T amongst the top 5, let's say like this. And so policy framework that foster investment, key priorities, and also what I always say all the time, if all the CEOs of a specific sector are calling for some changes, it means that something is there, okay? And for me, that's the most important part. When I'm doing this, and I promise I finish after that, Anna, when I'm doing these live discussions, at the same time, I have my 6-year-old son on the floor up that is doing his Zoom call, because we are still in virtual learning. I have my wife who is doing another Zoom call for work, and then I have my other older son who is doing his Zoom call downstairs. What it means is that I have 4 live conferences coming in the same house under the same broadband connection. And this require capacity. It require the fiber that we have, but it also requires the investment that in this case Verizon, because I am in a state where Verizon is the fiber provider, has done in order to bring me I know Pablo is funny, right? This is like this. But it requires that capacity that Verizon has built, but also it requires a possibility for Verizon to recuperate the investment. And so that flexibility of incentivizing the investment and having the possibility then to recuperate is essential. And then I will let Paolo and Andreas to follow, but really, avoiding the bottlenecks and the digital gatekeepers, I think, will be core, especially in a continent like Europe or in the 27 European countries where some of the operators are smaller and have much more difficulties probably to compete against global gatekeepers.
Thanks so much for opening our discussion today with this very enlightening answer. And I'd like to address my follow-up question to you, Mr. Arias. As member of the IMCO committee at the European Parliament, what exactly are the subjects that you find, that you need the European Parliament in particular to really put the onus on to get a digital single market that is fit for the digital age, as the Commission announced it, when the von der Leyen Commission got together last year. This was one of the big objectives for her upcoming presidency. Do you find that, in particular, your work addresses these kind of ambitions? Are you meeting these ambitions, or what kind of challenges do you find in your everyday work as a parliamentarian to meet those ambitions?
Thank you, Anna. Well, I would like to first of all thank you and thanks the Martin Center for inviting me today to this very interesting event. Competition in the digital field is a very relevant issue and a priority for our Internal Market and Consumer Protection Committee, and of course for me personally. We're going through a very sensitive moment for Europe in this global digital race. The goal must be to improve Europe's competitiveness in the global digital economy and achieve technological sovereignty. At present, we are far from that. The EU has little to say in a global revolution, the digital revolution, for the first time in history. We can go later into the details, but this is mainly because of 2 facts, in my opinion. A negative environment to allow our companies to innovate, and competitive barriers in our territory due to the strict competition rules. Having said this, we must now focus on how to catch up with other regions in the global digital race. I think the first step towards that is establishing an effective framework of the use of data always respecting, of course, our values and the European way of life. This will allow us to develop key technologies such as artificial intelligence, cloud infrastructures, quantum computers, and so on.
Thanks so much for diving more into the parliamentarian work. Mr. Schwab, at the moment, Germany is leading the presidency of the Council of the European Union. Obviously, both of you work in the European Parliament, so your focus is the European citizen, but I was wondering if you could also paint a picture of what it's like in Germany and the ambitions of the German presidency for this particular agenda that's been set.
Thanks, Anna. Good morning to Karim, and I'm in the same building as Pablo, so I have the same challenge like Karim because we are in the same meeting. Even if the connection of the parliament goes down, it's very bad for our conference. But having said that, I mean, the German presidency is struggling because in Germany, in the government, there are also several parties. But what I think in the European Parliament links us all together, and Pablo was excellent in figuring this out with his way of integrating the European way of life into that report on the Digital Services Act, is that we are unique in the world for freedom of expression, that we are unique in the world as European Union for the liberty to express yourself. But at the same time, we are also very strong democracies with a clear fixing of the rule of law. And to bring that both together in a globalized world with all these tendencies in China of control, with all the, let's say, economic pressure that the US are trying to do, with all the autocratic systems like Russia and Turkey, and also Bolsonaro in Brazil, I think this is a very good example, a keyword, how to express what we want to maintain in the European Union. And as I told you already, I'm very grateful for Pablo that he has found that expression to defend what we as EPP think is key. We think it's key because it creates fairness. It gives a chance to all small and medium-sized companies to have a good idea and to come to the marketplace. For sure, if there are big companies, they can stay, but they cannot destroy small companies. They cannot just buy everything what they want. They have to respect rules of keeping the market an open place like a democracy where you can be strong, and if you are doing well, you can remain strong. But you cannot get a monopoly. We don't want to have monopolies, and I have to tell you why. Because in the German history, and that's maybe the most important point for me on this, before the Second World War, there was also a tendency in Germany with big oligopolies and monopolies, and they have been helping the politics of the time to be very strong. So economics has played an important role in German history to bring political power at the center. And we have taken the conclusion that we don't want that anymore because the broader the market is, the more players there are, the better it is. And for that reason, Anna, we want to fight together also with Pablo, and I hope also with our American friends, because also in the US, there is plenty of people that are seeing that problem. We want to fight for competition rules to defend openness of the marketplace, openness of markets, and defending the chances for SMEs. And for that reason, we need ex-ante rules that define the competition policy that we are doing in Europe. Normally we do it ex post, but in that digital times where procedures are so fastly running, we have to find this to be done ex-ante, and that's what we care about.
An interesting question to ask to Karim, sorry, I'm just going to go a first name basis from now on. When you hear that ex-ante rules, does that tickle your fancy, or are you like, oh, this is a no-go for me? I'm curious to know what you think about this.
To be honest, I don't think it's the ex-ante or ex-post with the challenge. I think is what we write in those rules and how those rules are flexible enough, one, to allow technology innovation, and also the creation of a competitive marketplace. And I think this is exactly what Andreas thinks, because I've been having these discussions several times with Andreas. And I think the most important is clarity. Okay, I think a clear regulatory framework with clear objectives for the creation of a competitive marketplace and ecosystem. I think if we create the rules that allow all the players to flourish. This is good for the economy in general, because the important here is not only to look at a pie. If we want to think to food, I'm thinking to breakfast still, but you can take a pie. The most important thing is not to look at the pie as it is today and try to divide by pieces, is to work together to grow that pie, to have a pie that is much bigger. And this is the objective that we need to work all together. The aim is not to have each of us 20, 15%, is to allow to those SMEs that are the core of the European economy, but also the US economy, by the way, to be able to grow, and at the same time is to work all together to really work on that. So when we look at the ex-ante regime, and that is, by the way, how telecom operators are regulated, for example, the most important is to give the flexibility most of the time to the local regulators to be able to implement and to adapt to the local market, and also to look at that ex-ante framework to see all the incentives that operators or players, all the ecosystem will need in order to raise money and fund new technologies. So we are coming from a society where we move from first generation of mobile to fourth generation of mobile in a time frame that is incredibly small. And if you think to it, when I look at our network in 2007 to today, the network usage and capacity have been increasing. The usage have been increasing 470,000%. And these are things that are unbelievable, and I think every operator sees similar aspect. Most of the people listening to us are probably young, but when I was going at university, I didn't have a mobile phone. And trust me, I'm not so old, okay? I didn't have access to internet like people are used to have internet. I was not able to do a video call with my mother that was living in Tunisia. So the reality is, things are moving so fast that what we need to be sure is that when we write the rules, we're creating a flexible regime that allows the regulators who are implementing those rules to adapt compared to the new technology. Because we are moving from 4G to 5G now. This is the next step in, for example, mobile technology, and we need to be sure that all the players will have the incentive to deploy that 5G technology. That is very important. You need spectrum, you need capital, but that 5G technology is going to be a huge trigger for economical development, in this case post-COVID, but it was, even without COVID, it was going to be a huge creator of economical development, because it's going to allow not only people to get faster connectivity, but it will allow business to find new business model. It will allow schools to work on even more virtual schooling system in the future. Universities, people will have the possibility to access to different approaches. Telehealth that are essential, especially in countries that have huge rural areas where you cannot put incredible top-notch hospitals, you will be able to use new technologies to cover that. So I think the most important thing is not how, if it's an ex-ante and ex-post, but is what you write in it. And also a kind of, let's say, agreement between all the players that the main objectives is the good of the society. So economical growth, more investments, it means more revenue, but it also means more possibilities for every European citizens or US citizens to have more opportunity. That will be my view.
Thank you for that. That's it's great that you bring it back to the European consumer and the European citizen, because I wanted to talk about that because, as you said, Andreas, these regulatory rules obviously are also put in place to create fairness. And I was wondering, indeed, like Karim was saying, there is a worry that in rural areas, 5G might not be able to make it, because we've seen this quite well, frankly, everywhere in Europe, that there are almost like digital no man's lands, and where it's extremely difficult to get the infrastructure to bring 5G, to bring fiber, to bring anything really. So would you say, how would you address the worries of people that feel like they might be left behind in Europe, getting its act together on getting fit digitally for the next age? Andreas, if you would care to answer about this.
I mean, the point that we are all in front of is that we have left this task to regulators in member states on the one side and to private companies. And these private companies, they invest based on the conditions they find. That's the normal way in a market economy. And unfortunately, they don't find that attractive conditions in all member states of the European Union to boost this investment. In some places, yes, for some companies, yes, but unfortunately for some companies, it's a bit less interesting. They prefer to invest in other stuff, and that's very bad because the whole use of these technologies, as Karim has pointed out, is based on the fact that the broadband connections are there. So we have done a lot of push by the European Union, and the member states are also investing a lot, but unfortunately the implementation of this push has taken a lot of time. We are about to come to a result, but still there is a lot of investment missing. And this is a problem in all our constituencies. We want, and this is maybe sometimes a bit a European approach, if I may say so, we want that everyone, no one is left behind, and everyone is connected. And that makes it very costly, because if you go to the last agricultural place, to the last farm in my constituency, the last meter, it becomes very, very expensive. If you just keep the cities together, it's much cheaper. But our approach has always been everyone has to have a chance to be connected. No one should be left behind. And that makes us paying a price now. But that's the basic democratic fairness principle that in the long run may help us. But at the moment where the development in the US is very fast and in China, we are grappling behind because we are not at the level of challenge that is there.
Thank you for that. And actually going to you, Pablo, because the latest, we keep hearing new numbers on the multi-annual financial framework. They keep changing, it's still in negotiations, but sadly the digital part of the portfolio diminishes almost with every new negotiation. What is the European Parliament's stance on this? Like, do you think this is something that you're going to fight for more as an MEP to make sure that this doesn't continue reducing like this? Because like Andreas was saying, like there's we need to emulate fairness in the system, and it's hard to do that if there are no funds, of course, available to do this.
Thank you, Anna. Well, let me tell you that the world is experiencing a new revolution, the digital revolution, and for the first time, Europe is not a key player. Years ago, I said many times, Europe led the industrial and the technological revolutions, but now US and China are leading the development of the digital era. And the turn at the turn of the century, during the technological revolution, well, we all know that Europe had great leaders such as Nokia, and we were a relevant global actor. But the European Union has not been able to keep a proper ecosystem for the development of our companies. We are witnessing how US and Chinese digital companies have become global leaders, leaving EU companies behind, and with no ability to compete globally. Why did this happen? First, because the European Union companies had not the necessary tools to develop at the pace of the digital technologies. Digital technologies that nature develop exponentially. Our EU ecosystems did not provide the necessary agility to our companies to keep pace. Second, because the European legislation on competition did not allow our companies to grow. When a digital company emerged in the European Union, it is very likely that a digital giant buys it before it reaches a big size and becomes a threat. And usually, it is more profitable for a European entrepreneur if he has an offer to sell their startup to a foreign digital giant that keep fighting to grow in an hostile environment. The European Union has to fix this situation and win back our ground while respecting our values and, as I said, the European way of life. Commissioner Breton is well aware about this situation, and he presented in February a digital strategy. The strategy is very brave and goes in the right direction, in my opinion. But until now, we have heard the refrain of the song only. and we want to hear the full score.
That's a nice imagery. I was wondering, Karim, would you say as well that, there were numbers that showed at the start of the pandemic and the subsequent lockdown that there had been quite a vivid increase of intellectual property theft, mostly online piracy. Would you say that this is one of the dangers that maybe could impede the completion of a digital single market in the EU as well? I mean, it's not a problem that's just in the EU, obviously, but would you say that this is, a danger that regulators need to keep in mind?
So thanks for the question. And as a full disclaimer for the people who don't know it, obviously AT&T is the owner of a company called Warner Media, who is, let's say, a pretty important content producer from HBO to Warner Bros., Turner, and others. And it has been the last 3 years of my life, working on this, and we are very proud of it. And you're right, it is a challenge, and it is a problem that we have a little everywhere, okay? And Europe is one of those. So I think what we need to look at is a few points on this one, okay? For me, when I talk about piracy, I talk about four main principles. The first one is, it's what is unacceptable and unlawful offline should be unacceptable and unlawful online. First point. But only because online is just the same thing than offline. And we see it today, what we are doing, but also COVID, I think, is probably raising that more. The second point that we need to see when we talk about this is that all users should be empowered to manage online risks. And sometimes we don't connect the word piracy or digital theft to the online risk that is created. Okay, that's the second one. The third one is that companies that are operating internet platform that publish or make available their own content, products, service, or those provided by third parties, have a responsibility to their user with respect to the content, product, service they store, host, and commercialize. This is very important. And the last one, it's the normal one, okay, the one we are more used to. That is the copyright, trademark, patent protection, and anti-piracy effort are critical and must be protected. I know people love sometimes the so-called idea of free, but that can work only if you have a huge market power. But what we have to remember is that the great part of Europe has been every time content creation, talent, capacity, but it's coming very often by small players, small producers who have huge difficulties in protecting themselves. My wife is an artist. And I tell you, we have to spend a lot of money in trademark protection for our work and etc. It's very complicated. So I think really fighting piracy is essential, even more for Europe, because of the importance that we have of our cultural heritage. I am the proud son of an Italian man. And I tell you, when I am here in the US and I'm looking for my Italian content desperately, it's super, super important to have it, because the more we protect it, the more possibilities we create for that content to be more distributed. Because the people have the opportunity to create a value out of it. The second point that we don't have to forget, and I promise I shut up after that. Piracy is also a huge loss of money from governments. Because obviously every pirated product is a product that is not paid, meaning that is going in black market where the content creators don't get paid for it, so it cannot pay tax for it, and the other people are going to use it to resell it in a way that there will be no tax there too. So think to that mythical discussions that we are all having on creating digital taxes and etc. That is an important discussion that is happening at the OECD now. But sometimes we don't talk enough about all the money that is lost because of digital piracy. And this is really, really important. So let me remind you my first point. What is unacceptable and unlawful offline should be unacceptable and unlawful online. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Anna, this is Pablo. May I react with?
Yes, absolutely. You can. Please go ahead.
I'm absolutely agree with what Karim has said. When somebody or something is free, is offered us for free, I don't trust it because something is hiding behind it. I mean, nobody gives just for free what they have built. That's my opinion. No? The thing is that many companies, internet companies that used to offer their products for free, we can now see that it was not for free. The data was behind and we didn't know. And of course, now they are getting paid for their services or their products. But just to say, having said this, crimes such as IP crimes are just other type of illegal content, and as any legal type of content must be strictly combated. The directive on copyright in the digital single market adopted last year already addresses this challenge, and I believe that we must respect existing law to avoid overlaps. This directive has not even been transposed in most member states, which have until June 2021 to do so. We must therefore be patient to see the results of the implementation of the directive on copyright in the digital single market, which has had no time yet to deliver results. Furthermore, the directive envisages an evolution of its impact by 2026. Having said this, I believe that there must make sure that specific concepts are clearly defined.
Thank you for that, for this precision on what IP crimes, the danger that they represent. I'd like to now open the question actually to our viewers who are still following us on Facebook. We have quite a few questions. One of them is from Tommy Huhtanen, who's our executive director. He's asking, what are the challenges and perhaps the opportunities that the COVID-19 epidemic has created for the further digitalization of our economies? What does the current economic crisis mean for the development of the digital economy? Now, this is a question that's open to all three of you, so whichever one of you wants to address it, please do. And if you want to bounce on something that the previous speaker said, please feel free to do that. So I open the floor to either one of you. You can raise your hand if you want to, and I'll unmute myself as soon as you speak. Please, Pablo.
Thank you, Anna. E-commerce has proven to be a key to the European economy during the coronavirus pandemic. Despite the risk and failures that have been identified and must be addressed, we must continue to promote it. The problem of the spread of illegal dangerous products is exactly one of the main challenges that we addressed in our inquiry report of the DSA. In the EPP, we believe that we must address the problem of illegal products online that threaten our citizens' health. To that aim, we propose specific measures, such as making sure that all business partners of marketplaces are identified by platforms. But this is a two-way issue. I believe that users also have part of responsibility, and I said I believe that users also have part of responsibility and must be identifiable by competent authorities if needed. It means if they commit something illegal. Only by engaging all actors will be achieved a safe online ecosystem for everyone. That's my point.
Great. Yes, Andreas, you are muted.
I mean, obviously, Pablo is absolutely right, pointing out that e-commerce has proven to be successful and efficient and a very strong tool to overcome such a crisis. Unfortunately, the digital services itself that have been announced to help citizens to overcome and to protect themselves the crisis are not yet as good as we expect them to be. And there is also the shortcoming that digital has not been able so far to help really as much as some people would have hoped. And the same is true on the point that Karim mentioned. We are still missing the infrastructure that we need to make this a real success story. And we are missing also a bit of innovation in the European Union, because a lot of innovation that we have in the world is coming from the US. They are very good. We are very glad they are that innovative. But for sure, we want also to create incentives for companies in Europe to work in that area. And for that, we need the framework and the infrastructure. And I think the crisis has shown that there is a real need.
Just to bounce on that. Yeah, Karim, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was, I think I just want to really agree with Pablo and Andreas. And I think what we need to look at, especially for the point raised by Tommy on the post-COVID approach, is that what we need to look is that we are really seeing how much digitalization is essential for the future of the economy. I think we saw how digital was essential in this crisis, and people probably would have never imagined to be in a situation like this. Seriously, if somebody tells me that he was planning that a year ago and he would have imagined we were here, it will be really surprising. So what we need to be sure is that we need to work all together in order to allow all those small and medium enterprise and small and medium companies that are the core of European economy in this case, to be able to survive in a post-COVID environment. Okay, so that I think the discussions and the work between the ecosystem and between all the players, civil society, industry, and policymaker is going to be really important in order to create that environment that will allow the possibility to distribute the benefits across society in all the sectors. I think it's super important. Look, the thing that surprised me more is the capacity of our kids to adapt to an environment where, unfortunately, they cannot be in the same classroom than their kids, and their friends, sorry. And how they have been able to adapt so fast. They still need to be in the classroom, to be honest, because they need that physical contact. But it's incredible, and I think the new generations are so technological. My son is alone upstairs with his iPad and doing everything, and I am shocked on how impressive they are, to be honest. But this is a clear message that digital is going to be even more important in the years to come, and that we really need to create that framework that is allowing this, to say what Pablo was saying before, to allow Europe to be again in one of the driving seats. And to be honest, there are some incredible European technologies. Ericsson is one of the leaders on the 5G deployment. We work a lot with them. There are a lot of players that are there. But the most important is also to create the economical possibilities for the client of those players to invest and to continue to invest, because that's the way we are going to get our beautiful continent ready for the future.
And if I may just visualize for our viewers at home, I think the case of Estonia is an interesting one, because Estonia, long before COVID was even on the radar of anyone, they had e-voting, e-health. So e-governance has already been quite a thing for a while in Estonia, and they're coping basically with COVID quite a bit better than some other EU member states, because they already had this framework, this infrastructure that was already there. So I think Estonia definitely is an interesting case to follow, to see how they adapted so quickly and basically seamlessly in a way. But I'd like to...
Anna, let me commend also another country for the work that has been done in the past, because people have a tendency not to know that. But, Spain is in a situation today where they have some of the highest connectivity in Europe, if not the highest. I will need to check my data. But because previous governments, in the years of the implementations, have been creating a framework that was really supporting high-speed investments in broadband. And it worked pretty well. Spain is pretty impressive as a capacity. So I don't know if Pablo wants to tell us a little more. But I think that's an example. Estonia We often say it's a smaller country, it's a newer country, that's why they've been able to do it. But if I look at the example of Spain and what Spain has been able to do, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, Anna, may I? Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. You are absolutely right, and thank you for bringing this example and to put it on the table. Spain is absolutely, in my opinion, and I think in the opinion of all experts, one of the most connected countries around Europe. We have been ready for something that nobody was ready. That is exactly this kind of meetings and this kind of telework that we were not very familiar with it. And of course, we were absolutely connected with capacity, with enough capacity to maintain the demand on not only this, but also all the digital products and contents that were on the net during those days. That was incredible high. In terms of and let me link it with this, the 5G. The Commission has already acknowledged that 5G will not be launched across all EU member states by 2020, as originally planned in the 2016 5G action plan for Europe. I think it was called like that. The delay has been caused by the coronavirus crisis, and we need to adapt to the new circumstances. Commissioner Breton, he stated that we need to encourage private investment and hand in hand with trusted partners. The EU has everything it needs to develop 5G infrastructure, as Karim has said, and we have to do it following our values. And as I always said, and I'm not. I want to also put it on the table, and the European way of life. As Commissioner Breton has said many times, we have to ensure a high level of security when deploying 5G networks in the EU. This is, of course, goes by protecting our citizens and companies' privacy and data. Data owners will be the ones leading the digital race, this digital race. We can clearly see that the deployment of 5G goes beyond the technological sphere and becomes in a political and geostrategic matter. For sure, Ericsson is a good partner, Karim, and I think that we have not only Ericsson but some European companies that can put on the table our technology for the 5G connectivity in Europe.
Speed up the pace a bit because we're almost arriving at the end of our conversation, but I have quite a lot of questions that are really interesting from our Facebook viewers. So I'm going to post two at the same time, and feel free to take either one of the two or address the two when it's your turn to speak. On the one hand, I have a geopolitical question from Professor Giga Turk, who's a professor at the University of Ljubljana. His geopolitical question sounds as this: can the EU and the US agree on compatible regulation of internet and digital economy, with China obviously creating its own subnet behind its wall? Or will the US opt for a freer and the EU for a more restricted or controlled user-protected version? So that's a geopolitical question. Feel free to ask me to repeat if you need to. And then there's a more institutional question coming from former MEP Michel Boni. How can we imagine the agenda for decisions on data, AI, data spaces, DSA, and how do you assess the cooperation amongst all of these different partners? So feel free to take either one or both questions. Maybe Pablo, you want to start first talking? Oh no, let's go with Andreas. I see you raised your hand.
But I didn't want to cut Pablo, but I would like to go for the first question, because I think it's very important, because Karim said before, Sometimes people like to have a free access and so on and so forth. People in Europe also like to have freedom. And this is something what we have to balance. We want that the European Union remains the place in the world where freedom has a home for individual people, for citizens, for those who want to make their life, if they respect all the others. And this is a very difficult balance that we have to find here, because there is the freedoms of the others at the same time at stake. And I think that is in a certain way the most difficult question that we have to solve. We don't want to cut the freedom of people to express themselves. We don't want to go for any support of authoritarian regimes that want to pre-register people before they can speak freely. We don't want to cut liberty to speak. But at the same time, we also want to defend the liberty of artists and authors to have IP rights on what they have been working on for years. And to find the right balance here, I think that will be very difficult. It has been already a difficult discussion that we had in the past, and I'm sure that Pablo has the experience in the Digital Services Act, that it's very difficult to find the right balance. And the EPP stands for trying to find the best balance. We are not naive on the side of the freedom of expression. We want to defend that without any reduction, without any loss. But at the same time, we also have to defend people that invest in intellectual property, and we cannot allow that this is cut. And that's a very difficult discussion, and we should not go too much in one nor in the other direction. And although I know that Michael Boney is always asking extremely intelligent questions, I stop here and I leave the second question to others. Thanks.
Anna, may I?
Yes.
Yes, I agree with what Andreas has said. Just to point out my opinion on the first question. Well, it's not a secret. Europeans, U.S. citizens, and Chinese population, we are not the same. We think different, we do things different, and we manage things different. So, do we have commercial agreements with them? For sure, absolutely. Why not in digital? But the question is not that. The question is, where are our companies at this moment, and where are the companies from US and China? And we are not at the same level because our rules and our ecosystem is not the best for the digital sphere. So the problem is, are we can be capable to get agreements with the US for the digital race? For sure, but they will do it with their way. We will do it with our way. We have to see each possibility with our different positions. That's for sure. An example. 4 giants of internet, all Americans, they own almost more than 90% of the data, of the private data around the world. Are they, for example, capable to share that data with our SMEs, for example, just to put an example on the table? Because they got many data, that may be private data from European citizens, but they don't share it with anybody. And it's fair, but it's something that they manage, and is the way that they have to do things. In Europe, we have proposed an open place for data that is going to be a disposal of SMS. That's the strategy that Commissioner Barnier put on the table. Are the companies going to be able to have in that EU common space of data, European common space of data, are they going to be able also to use the private data that the giants of internet has? It should be an incredible agreement. Private data that they have, and the public data that we have. Put it together in the same place for them and for us. Could be possible, in my opinion, at this moment, no, but not because we don't want it. It's because they don't want it. It's the price that they got when everything was free in the internet. That's my point.
And if I can compliment Anna, I think we are talking about something that, and I think Michal was a big pusher of that, is the question of free flow of data. Okay, I think this is important. Free flow of data means, I'm a big believer in the US-EU, trade agreement. We have been pushing that for so long. Because I am a European living here in the US, I see it even more, I think. I think that's very important. We need to try to work on facilitating cross-border digital innovation by discouraging, if possible, the forced localization of data, at least country by country. There was a European data retention directive, that I think regulation that was unfortunately a takedown. Encouraging openness to emerging technology and service, very important. Lifting restrictions to support investment, but most important in everything, supporting data portability principles. And where is necessary, because we see potential bottlenecks and etc., promoting interoperability, with a word that is at the core of the development of our ecosystem, interoperability. And this is how GSM was created, great European technology. So, I think that's what I will add to the great points of Pablo and Andreas.
Great, thank you. Actually, to come back to the geopolitical side of things, we have one interesting question from Katerina Jakimowska, which is super topical at the moment, because as you know, TikTok is being banned in the US at the moment. And her question basically was, how do you see that announcement as well about Facebook's possible withdrawal from Europe, banning TikTok in the US? Are we going to face a regulatory shakeup in the digital market? And how would this affect the economy? If any of you wants to dive into this, I think it's a nice way of coming slowly to the conclusion of our event. Like, of course, we're still, very much affected by current events. This is obviously going to have an impact on the regulatory work and the framework that parliamentarians and regulators are going to have to come up with. Feel free to dive into this. Andreas, go ahead.
I should be very short because my colleagues have to say something as well. I think we need an international agreement on data flow and on data security. And I think it's very welcome that the US are pushing for this very strongly. That it has to be clear that data that are used are owned by the citizen and not by the state in which the company has its seat. And for that, we need to be very tough. And at the moment, it's the US, but we share the concern on this, and we should defend it together. And very quickly, I don't believe that Facebook will ever leave the European Union. Don't worry.
Anybody else want to have some last words around this subject on the pervasiveness of recent events in these debates? Go ahead, Pablo.
Just to say something about this, you mentioned Facebook and their announcement to the possibility to leave Europe. What can I say about this? Facebook is a very important company, for sure, but they are free to do whatever they want. We don't forbid anything here in that sense. They can be here. They use all the, for example, operators' infrastructure just to become a player. I think Europe is a very good market for them. And I think it's, let me use this word, it's stupidity from their side. If they want to play that game, it's up to them. But I don't believe that they were sharing with the people and a serious position on that they are really thinking in leave Europe. But having said this, they use for sure not only here but everywhere that where they are, they use the operators' infrastructures. And Karim has know much more than I do about this, but I mean, it's something that it sounds curious for me, but and weird, but well, they are free to do whatever they want. And in the case of the companies that some companies that have been forbidden in countries or whatever, I'm not sure if you are talking about TikTok and the problem that they have in the US. I don't think that I don't believe in this kind of policies. I don't think so. It's not good. It's not good for anybody. It's not good for the private sector. It's not good for companies that came from outside of countries or the European Union, and it's not good either for the place that is forbidden this kind of companies. And that is that kind of things are the things that regimes like China do or North Korea, but not in our world. That's my point.
It's nice to hear some strong words as well, because indeed it's an unexpected situation, and obviously a lot of people are thinking, are we going to reply with tit for tat kind of strategy? But how do you even do that? I mean, it's really quite new as a phenomenon. Like, yeah, I've never seen anything like it, to be fair. Karim, do you want to have some last words?
Considering that it's 10:01 DC time and that this is a very sensitive issue, I'm going to use my faculty of not answering. Okay, look, it's a work in progress here in the US, so it's difficult for me to comment on something that is led by the administration. Okay, I hope you guys are going to accept this answer.
We can take it. Well, I think that concludes pretty much our event. We were so happy to have all three of you today. Thank you so much, our two members of the European Parliament of the EPP Group, and thank you, Karim, so much. Thank you, Pablo. Thank you, Andreas. We've had a lot of food for thought today. Great questions as well from the audience following us on Facebook. Thank you very much for that. And we'll be back as well, of course, with many more events in the upcoming week. So we're digital. We hope you are too. And we'll see you soon. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Thank you. Bye. Bye, Karin.